Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is your AP teacher, Mr. Tao, and now we're going to talk about freshwater ecosystems for just a little bit. When I think about freshwater ecosystems, there's going to be a lot of key terms that go into this. First off, lakes are lentic bodies of water, which means that they're standing still, lentic, and then there are several zones that lakes are broken up into. Those zones are the littoral, limnetic, profundal zone, and then finally on the bottom, the benthic zone. So let's get right to a diagram and take a look at it. All right, so here we have a lake zonation diagram, and if I open this animation for just a brief second, I'll see here that this guy is broken up based mostly on sunlight and location. So the edge of the lake, near the water's edge to where rooted plants grow, that's going to be our littoral zone. Out here, the open part of the lake, where we get lots of sunlight, that's going to be called the limnetic zone. And down here, where there is no light, similar to the abyss of the ocean, is called the profundal zone. The benthic is everything on the bottom. It's not labeled here, but it's everything along the bottom. So lakes really are then further categorized based on how old they are. And the first type of lake we'll look at is an oligotrophic lake. Imagine New York 10,000 years ago. The glacier just left, and now we've got rocks, not a lot of plants. The species have not moved in. Or we could have an environment where we have a short growing season. A short growing season would also mean not a lot of plants, right? So an oligotrophic lake has low nutrient supply, low primary productivity, clear water, very few plants. We can see this when we go mostly closer to the glacier. So where's the glacier today? It's up in the North Pole. So we'd have to go further north. We can go up into the Adirondacks. We could go up into Canada, or I can take you to Maine, right? So this is actually Sebago Lake in Maine. Looks like a great place to go swimming, but the water is pretty cold. But this is what an oligotrophic lake really looks like. You look at the shoreline, no rooted plants. Clear water. It's crystal clear. You can see 20 feet deep in this lake. The water is a lot deeper than it even looks there. And you can see it's a rocky shoreline, not much silt. Silt accumulates as a result of plants and plant stems and leaves and things that fall to the bottom. Since there are not many plants, that doesn't happen. This would probably not be the best place to go fishing either. So here we have it, artist rendition, oligotrophic lake. Right? Mesotrophic lakes are in the middle, right? So a mesotrophic lake is something that started to move along, and that's probably the way that most lakes are in central New York. Along a mesotrophic track, we're starting to see silt, we see more birds. You see in this picture, we see a turtle and some fish, and we have a well-developed food web. The plants have had time to get themselves rooted. Plants, of course, are then eaten by consumers. Consumers excrete wastes. The wastes are consumed by decomposers, and the decomposers convert those wastes into nitrates, which plants like and take back up again. But of course, to develop a food web like that takes time. It doesn't happen overnight, right? So when I think of a mesotrophic lake, I think of this. I see a lake with lily pads and open water in the middle, right? And here's just one example of an organism we could find in a mesotrophic lake, snapping turtle, right? As lakes mature, though, we're going to see more and more life, rich in fish, many species of turtles, many species of frogs, and lots of plants. And so when we go further south, it's been longer since the glacier was there, and we find a lot of times more eutrophic looking lakes, right? So let's now go from Maine, let's go to Georgia. So I'm going to take you to Pine Hill, Georgia, where we can find a eutrophic lake. And this particular eutrophic lake I'm going to show you is unique because the Piedmont soils of Georgia are very red, rich in iron, and these turtles that live down there are these yellow-bellied sliders. But apparently they're not yellow-bellied, they're red. And it's all because of the fact that the soils are rich in iron, really. And so we can see how sometimes nature can be deceiving. You think that it's a red-eared slider, a red-bellied slider. No, it's a yellow-bellied slider, but it's got a red belly because of the iron that's in it, right? So this is an example of a eutrophic lake, right? There's where that guy came from. That's what it looks like in the daytime. And when I look out here in the middle of this, I can see lots of plants starting to take root way out in the middle of the lake. Lots of rooted plants around the sides. I wouldn't call it fully eutrophic, but it's definitely on its way there, right? Lots of fish. How many fish? Enough fish to create even these features. These are little potholes that have been created by fish that are in the water when they swim in circles and stir up mud and silt on the bottom, right? Now, a eutrophic condition, truly eutrophic, can lead to this phenomenon. What we're seeing here is actually a harmful algal bloom. These can occur in bays and inlets. We see them more near the ocean than we do inland. But we know that all freshwater ecosystems, generally speaking, run off into marine ecosystems. And sometimes what happens is you have a river, like the Chesapeake Bay that we talked about, and it just flowing downhill. Lots and lots and lots of nutrients, right? It's just cruising. And the decomposers and the plants are there, but maybe it's lacking something. Maybe it's lacking oxygen. Maybe it's lacking some other water to mix with, some limiting agent. Once it hits the bay or hits the ocean, all of a sudden it explodes with life, renewed life, all that nutrient entering the ocean, and we get these harmful algal blooms. And this is an example of a harmful algal bloom right here. Okay, here's an example of eutrophication on land, right? There's a river up in the upper corner here, but right down here, well, that is nutrient loaded due to, I believe I got this picture, was due to a paper mill. Right? So here's an example of why we should not dispose of wastes in a closed body of water. Solution of pollution is dilution. That's not really politically correct, if you will, but that is kind of a rule of thumb that has been followed by a lot of environmentalists. Really, the solution of pollution is to prevent it, but solution of pollution here, dilution. So we can see what that really eutrophic condition looks like. Lakes, terms of eutrophic lakes, excess nutrient supply, high primary productivity, murky water, and as long as we have a well-developed fish population, everything is good. It's okay, because the fish have time to eat the plants. The fish-plant ratio is kind of in check, consumers and producers. And then, of course, the amount of waste that are produced by fish, there's enough decomposers to handle that. It's kind of happy. Here's an artist's rendition of that eutrophic lake. However, when people greatly load an ecosystem with too many nutrients all at once, it can lead to a bloom of algae, as we said before. So here it is, Echo Lake in Goshen, right downstream of the Altari landfill. I don't know if that's where the runoff is coming from, but here you wouldn't even know it's a lake. It looks like a putting green. And what happens in this case is the plants grow so fast that the food web is not well developed. So the plants grow to the point that they either are choked by a lack of sunlight or they grow to the end of their life and they die. And when a plant dies, it falls to the bottom. When it falls to the bottom, all that's there are decomposers. So now I have decomposers trying to handle fish waste, and I have decomposers handling this renewed waste from all the dying plants. So basically the decomposer population just explodes. If you remember, decomposers are very effective at removing dissolved oxygen. Fish need a dissolved oxygen level of 4.0 usually. That's the minimum, sorry about the zero, minimum for most fish. Decomposers, on the other hand, can drop that level down to 0.2. Now, if you have lots of decomposers, you essentially have a body of water that has no oxygen in it and no fish. So rapid plant growth, decay on the bottom. Decay leads to more nitrates. More nitrates means more plant growth. So you get these blooms and death, and blooms and death, and blooms and death, over and over and over and over again. So it's a vicious cycle. We call that positive feedback, right? So here it is, lake summarized. If we think about what humans do, humans can culturally eutrophy a lake, leading to a hypertrophic lake. Hypereutrophic lake. Now, one other thing to mention is that lakes are unique because in the different seasons, lakes experience turnover. And if we take a look at this diagram, this animation that shows us lake turnover, I want you for a minute to imagine a lake in the wintertime, right? A lake in the wintertime will be frozen over here at the top, such that the temperature is near 0 degrees Celsius, and then it's constant throughout. There is no mixing, right, during the wintertime. During the spring and fall months, let's just go spring, what ends up happening is, in the summertime, this whole thing warms on top. This would be our linetic zone up here. We have a thermocline and then a cold layer. What ends up happening is we get water that's just up here, and it does not mix with anything underneath. The lake is said to be stratified, right? And so in order for this to happen, we go through what's called an overturn. If I reset this a minute, in the winter, the lake, it looks like this. And because it is cold at the top and warmer at the bottom, there's no mixing. The whole lake then warms to where it's all the same temperature in the spring, right? The ice melts, and at some point in time it's the same temperature. And then in summer, bingo. Now the top layer is warmer. There is no ice. And you've experienced this if you ever swam in a lake. You did a swift kick. You hit the thermocline. Whew, that's cold. Don't want to go down there, right? So no mixing. The mixing is important at certain times of the year because it helps to redistribute the nutrients. So if I go back to our little PowerPoint here, we have the epiliminin, which is this top layer right here, the thermocline, which is the boundary, and the hypoliminin, like hypothermia, is the cold layer on the bottom. This is in the summertime, right? Overturn, as we started to say, occurs because now the top layer cools, right? In the summer, you see the steam come off in the fall. The whole thing now is the same temperature. It allows it to mix, redistribute oxygen and temperatures evenly. Very important in seasonal lakes. Last bit, streams and rivers, lotic bodies of water, right? They're moving water. You remember what lakes were? Lakes were lentic. These are lotic, right? So really lakes have each have a characteristic zone that makes them unique to support different plants and animals. And the watershed is the area that is drained by a river and its tributaries. So we all live in the most of us live in the Wayway on the Creek watershed here. If you live over in Greenwood Lake, you live in the Wanacue River watershed. So here we have it, streams and rivers, right? We've got the source zone with lots of rapids, transition zone, where we now have a little bit of meandering starting, and then finally we have the floodplain zone with lots of meanders and oxbow lakes and features such as that, right? Wetlands are areas that are covered with freshwater part or all of the year. Wetlands are important because they act like giant sponges, help to filter pollutants, and humans really have impacted wetlands because they haven't been valued, like the meadowlands. We've built on them, we filled them in, and what that's led to is problems with flooding and really water quality. So actually in a lot of states now it's illegal to fill in a wetland. If you do so, something called mitigation banking, you have to then create another wetland somewhere else. Okay, so that's all we have for now. Go ahead and attempt the questions at the end of this PowerPoint that are in the lesson, and be sure to ask questions in class.